to this Sustainability Advisory Board on Thursday, September 5th, since we had to account for Labor Day in there. This is our call to order. Could you please take roll call, Emma?
Margie Davey,
Here.
Lisa Marone, Jacob Claymeyer,
Here.
Alyssa Ranke,
Here.
Vic Oliver,
Here.
Brad Spanbauer,
Here.
Joe Stevenson,
Here.
and Jaden Zern.
Here.
7 present, we have quorum.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. I'm guessing there's no public comment since we're the only people in the room, so we'll move on to the approval of minutes from our last meeting on August 5th.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Okay, and we have introduction for new board members. I'm not sure how far back we need to go with this, frankly. I'm not sure we've done this all the way around. Did we ever introduce you?
Yeah.
Okay, we did. Okay, well then, would you like to just tell us your name and why you wanted to join us?
Well, my name's Jaden Zern. I think I've met most of you, almost all of you. I see a lot of familiar faces. So I've always been passionate about sustainability for years and years. I went to UW Oshkosh. I'm an environmental studies grad. Just incredibly passionate about making a difference in the community, and I see this as one of the most impactful ways to do so.
We'll hope so. Okay, thank you very much. I see that we have Mr. Lyons here with us tonight, which is awesome. You're welcome anytime, just to be clear.
Why, thank you, Mark.
For those of you who don't know, Mark is the planning director for the city of Oshkosh. And did you want to address this, or do you want to wait until we have some discussion?
I will wait till we're on the agenda and you have interest. Gonna stay for the whole meeting.
Are you? And the workshop too?
Oh, let's not go.
We'll see how quickly we can get through everything else. Okay, native landscaping areas. Remind me, did we receive anything on this as part of our packet?
No, we were supposed to do his homework from last time. None of the messages we got.
Okay. This might be where I'd like you to address something.
This is part of why I came tonight to help out both in the last round when the ordinance was revised. And just, I think, occasionally this comes up where there's a bit of chair. A bit of confusion about, what the intention of that ordinance was for. And why it was put in place, and what the goal and objective was of why we tried to modify that ordinance to create an opportunity for people to do native planting areas and really separating them into 2 separate issues. Those are the issues of use of native plantings in landscaping, when you have a berm or a landscape bed and you want to use native plantings. The ordinance is not drafted to have anything to do with that. If you are using native plantings as part of your landscaping of your home, that's not what the native planting ordinance was there for. That native planting ordinance was drafted solely to handle those situations where a property owner wants to choose an alternative over turf grass for their primary ground cover. So if an individual wants to not have, typical turf grasses you would see in a residential environment and mowing the grass and the maintenance that comes with it, and they wanted to go with a maintenance-free native alternative to that, that is what the native landscape ordinance is there for. It's there for an opportunity for someone to say, I don't want to do what is traditionally done. I want low maintenance, environmentally friendly opportunity. And it gives them an ability then to apply for that and deal through the city forester a way to accomplish that low maintenance, environmentally friendly option, and then make sure they're no longer then subject to enforcement for typical long grass, weeds type of ordinances. But again, it was never intended, it is not the intention of that ordinance to ever be used when it comes to the use of native plantings as part of a landscape type improvement. You're landscaping around your home, a berm, a fence line, anything of that nature. It is really just intended for those situations as someone choosing to use it as an alternative to typical turf grass.
And just for clarity, I'm glad you made that delineation. But so if someone uses like mass plantings of native grasses within their landscaping areas, that's allowed?
Perfectly allowed, not subject to any like the
Sure.
weed eating grass type ordinances. Those are, it's landscaping at that point.
Sure.
It is not your primary ground cover.
Sure. I think that was part of the distinction we were struggling a little bit with. So
Yeah, so I guess, how do we get that added in, or how do we adjust? Because, I mean, we all read it, and we're quite confused. So, I mean, I'm going to make a broad assumption that the general population reading it is also going to be confused.
And
So
I guess
how do we clarify?
the reason for my question was, is that required to be in the ordinance? Would you, like, let's say I planted a bunch of native grasses or native flowers. Would you, in a landscape bed, would you be enforcing weed ordinance on that at all?
We would not be, and I think to Vic's point here, if the general public reads it and it's not clear, that's where we need to come in and we need to make clarifications within, whether it's within the native planting ordinance, if it's within the noxious weeds ordinance. We need to make sure people can clearly understand what those ordinances are for and why they're in place.
Agreed.
So if what we're doing from a practice and intent standpoint isn't matching up with the general reading of it, that's where we do need to come in and make changes to the ordinance, even if it's just clarifying the definition or the intent sections so people have that clear understanding of what the difference is.
I'm going to assume, Mark, that although you're not able to attend all our meetings, you do watch them later so that you're up to speed with what we do
With
here.
popcorn and everything. I think.
Yeah, so going with that assumption, you do realize that this came up when we had the city forester here and we're asking him questions, and he knew nothing about a landscape ordinance, although he's mentioned in, not by name, of course, by position in the ordinance.
Yep.
And that's where we started.
And that's where we've been
questioning.
working with the city forester on, and I think Emma even has some copies of like the application and everything we've been working on with him. Obviously, he is newer to that position, so there's that learning opportunity for their staff, our staff, to help assist him with those. One thing we always strive for when we're dealing with this type of ordinances is making it easy on the public, but also trying to make sure the staff that have to then enforce it and deal with it have an easy form to use and process to use. So whenever there's opportunities for us to improve process, improve the ability of staff and the ability of the public to deal with them, we always want to look at making those improvements. And I have a great staff that keeps me up to date on all the things going on in SAB.
Yeah, we can share.
Yes, you do. You have a great staff, period. So there's that.
I've got a follow-on question.
Yeah.
If we're talking about replacing your entire lawn with native plantings, and I think in this ordinance, it has like a setback rule as well. I guess, would there be anything stopping somebody from converting their entire lawn into quote-unquote landscaping with, I think what we had talked about in the previous meeting was like, we see a lot with borders.
Yep.
And if that's the threshold, to define it as a landscaping area, I think that's what we need to focus in on.
Yep.
Or some way so that the public can understand what's purposeful and what's perhaps negligent at a certain height or something.
Correct. And that's something that I think there is some opportunity for improvement, is making those distinction. And, if you are going to do it as a landscape feature, technically you can go right up to the property line first in native planting area, which has that 5-foot buffer. And the reason that was contemplated when the ordinance was previously written was impact on adjoining property owners. If it is a defined area and it is confined in mulch, stone, a mechanism to contain within an area that you can easily be defined as, okay, this is a landscaping feature. It's less of an impact on the neighbor than when it becomes an entire space. And sometimes we're dealing with those kind of negative connotations that maybe adjoining property owners have, and trying to balance those two things against each other, where they see just the back area of the neighbor and it looks overgrown. Well, if it is purposefully done and landscaped, I think we can help neighbors understand why something is being done. Or if they just perceive it as, well, they're not maintaining their backyard, why? And we could say, well, they've worked with the city forester, they've went through a native planting area, that they're looking to create environmental benefits. That's why you see what you see out there. It also helps city staff from the standpoint of, if someone does go through that process, when those complaints come in, we avoid any unnecessary staff time on having to go out and do enforcement actions when it's like, okay, we can look it up, city staff knows, but this is a native planting area, as long as it's within the confines of what they were approved for. The city forester may have to go out and just verify that, the plan was implemented as drawn, but it can kind of help that staff along that process.
And what was you said it was 5 feet? Is it that buffer?
Correct.
Okay.
If for a native landscape area, there's a 5-foot buffer side and rear. Is it all the way around?
I think it's all the way around.
Yeah.
On all sides.
But if it has a border or if it's a landscaped area, you can go up to the property line.
Correct.
Up to the property. Okay.
Yep.
So here, this application seems to indicate that you submit the application to the city forester.
Correct. For native planting areas or native landscape areas. And that's partially where maybe we want to.
Where did the parks thing come in?
They work through the Parks Department. The city forester is an employee of the Parks Department.
Yeah, but can you scroll on this to it?
The director of
Where-
parks?
It was director of parks.
Yeah, when we wrote the ordinance, we put it that way essentially as that is.
Director of parks or designee.
Yep, and that's who the city forester is the designee through in the Parks Department. The city forester is a employee of the Parks Department.
Okay.
That's kind of the standard language you see in municipal codes where it always names the division head, the department head, and then they designate it down to their appropriate employee, which in this case is the city forester.
Okay.
I was thinking he was in Public Works, so. Yeah.
I mean, I think, Mark, your explanation makes a lot of sense, and I think that's what we sort of all assumed was the case. But assumptions and code are two different things, and so I think, I think just like it sounds like we're all in agreement that clarifying language here will just, I think, help everybody. I mean, even Vic and I were just commenting, the second double-starred statement on this document says native plantings and small designated planting beds do not need an application. Well, can we define small?
Or just cut out the word.
Yeah, or just use
Native
the
plantings in a
landscape
designated
feature, I think,
planting
is
area.
just consistently use it across the board.
Yep. So I think,
Agreed.
clarity in this stuff is important. And even looking, we call these native landscape areas. We took that term because when we were rewriting the code, we found it was commonly being used. But should it be, and this is where we start wordsmithing everything and you never know where you land, right? Should it be native planting areas instead of native landscape areas? Because landscaping can somewhat cause confusion because we're talking about, meaningful landscaping that is intentional landscaping being done. So I think there are opportunities that we can look at this and make some of those adjustments for clarity.
That'd be great.
Yeah, just wordsmithing.
Yep.
Do we require turf grass?
We do.
And that 5
And how can we
buffer,
do
I'm
that?
assuming.
It is not specifically called out as turf grass. It's a more generic term of ground cover, and if I can get my computer to work, I'll try to find the actual term that's in there. But it requires stabilization of some measure for erosion and runoff.
So
You could also do with rocks or something.
Potentially, then we get into stormwater management, and then if you're using rocks, what is the impervious nature, what's under them, things of that nature.
So again, sorry, just trying to think this through. So if I, for example, wanted my backyard to be like a landscape prairie, I do or do not fill out an application.
If you want your backyard to be natural prairie grass, no maintenance, that would be an appropriate use of
application.
the application.
Doesn't matter about borders or anything like that.
It would need the border in that instance along with the application of this code that has the 5-foot buffer. If you wanted to have turf grass and you mix in some landscape beds and areas and berms,
Sure.
those would not need that process. It's when you
replace turf grass.
replace turf grass with native area is the
Okay.
intention of it.
So you have to leave a 5-foot buffer of turf around it.
You would have to have a 5-foot buffer of, would not necessarily have to be turf.
You could, like,
That is where
mulch
you
it if
could
you wanted,
potentially
right?
do landscaping, traditional landscape improvements, and then fully, maybe you incorporate some of your native plantings into there. The concern that we heard and when we were researching this was it came down to maintenance and perceived mice, mole type of fish. If the closer you got to the property line, the potential impact for that to impact an adjoining property owner that maybe was not on board with it.
But
so
if
by
you
putting
have-
a 5-foot buffer in, and then having that, even the 5 buffer is traditional landscaping, you've, to a degree, lessened that impact.
Why
And
5
it is-
feet? How did we get to 5 feet?
As we were doing the research, it was the common number we found that places
Okay.
are using.
Okay.
We should be progressive. I think we should change it to 2.
I think we should
Or,
get rid of it.
yeah, or even on the, I think you could probably go
hate it.
0 in the backyard. I think the biggest perception will probably be front yard stuff, because people see it. You could go 2 in front yard, 0 in backyard.
And from a practical standpoint, I have to question why it makes a difference if your entire backyard is prairie or if you have the outside edges of your backyard be prairie and throw a little turf grass right in the middle. Because basically, that's
versa.
what you're saying, right? If we have a 4-foot square of turf grass, we're good. Did I misunderstand that?
No, you would need the native planning. If you, as soon as you would look to implement a maintenance-free solution, you couldn't just put a small portion of turf grass and then not need anything else. If you were doing that, you would need to go through this process for the native planning area. You couldn't just put a small bit of turf grass in to get around it.
Right.
But if you're, let's say you take a backyard and you want to do, the vast majority of kind of 3 sides of your backyard in native prairie, but there's a border around it. If you put a rock border or a plastic edge border, does that apply to this?
You would still need that for that majority area.
Okay, I'm not following. I'm confused. Did you get that?
So how is that different from being a landscaped area?
So I guess it's kind of 2 situations. If it was mainly turf and you had just landscape beds around the outside, no need for native planning area approval. If you had the vast majority of your backyard in a native prairie style, and then landscaped outside of that in that 5-foot required area, the main backyard is still a native planning area. Because what the native planning area there is designed for is making sure you're no longer subject to the requirements of cutting it, noxious weeds, grass, over 8 inches. So you're going to want that approval for that area so you have that exemption that you don't have to do it.
So then wouldn't it be better to state if your landscaping contains like 51% native, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it sounds like there should almost be more of a percentage involved in order to take out all the objectivity coming from landscaping.
Well, and the other factor is if you have a very small backyard and
5
you have
feet
to
is
have
screwed.
5 feet on 3 sides, you got nothing left on some yards.
Looking at the individuals that have been interested in the city in the past, it has almost entirely been an all or nothing type of situation. The people that want to do this have never been, at least that we've dealt with up to this time. And obviously,
Right. And that we know
as we
about.
make urban improvements, there may be more people that are interested in it. But it's people that have been interested in doing this want their entire backyard or front yard or side yard to be in a native area.
Sure.
And the ordinance was drafted with that in mind, that the vast majority of the people or the contacts and discussions we've had have been coming at it from that side, where it's not like they just want to do a small area, they want to do it in the entirety for the benefit of their yard. Which makes it harder than, that's the thing with ordinances, zoning, and everything else, like you have to kind of regulate for the norm, and then you use variances or whatever mechanism you need for the new and outlying circumstances that come up. It's hard to write ordinances that handle every situation across the board. So when ordinances are drafted, we're trying to draft them to apply to the common questions or concerns we're getting.
Is it permissible to include visual examples
Yeah, we definitely can.
in this? So like I'm just kind of thinking about, right, like drawing out some examples of someone's yard and sort of designating, landscaped beds or a landscaped edge to your yard and saying like there's going to be native perennials in here. In the middle of your yard is turf grass, right? Regular Kentucky blue turf grass.
Yep.
I guess providing some examples and saying
This
these
requires an
these
application.
examples require an application. These examples do not require. An
Yeah, I think that's
application.
easy enough to do. Something we do a lot of, and we can work with Travis on it, is in zoning, we provide all sorts of site plan examples to help exactly illustrate that point so people have an understanding. I think that's perfectly reasonable for us to put together a handful of examples that we can give out, and help people understand, are you doing A or are you doing B?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're doing C, well, then we might need to have a further discussion, kind of figure it out.
Yeah. To Marty's question a little earlier, so the application and the ordinance was drafted to kind of avoid avoid issues with kind of coming up against some of these other pieces of code. If someone wanted to, let's say, take their front yard, they've already got some landscaped beds, but the remaining area that is currently in regular turf grass, they wanted to do clover, or they wanted to do some other kind of
Hardy ground cover.
yeah, like a ground cover that just doesn't really require mowing, doesn't really require watering. Does that apply? Does that require this kind of a
So that would
shift?
really be up to a property owner. If that ground cover they're going to use is a item that is going to get over 8 inches in tall frequently, then I'm going to suggest to them they would want to go through this if they never wanted to have
But if
to
it's going to
maintain
stay
it.
short,
But if it's a shorter, if it's
Yeah, clover
clover or
doesn't
something that only gets a couple of inches tall, 3, 4, 5 inches tall, if you never get over 8 inches, it's never something you're gonna have to worry about. You would not need to go through this. This is to give you that exemption from
the 8-inch
the
rule.
8-inch rule.
It's meant to
Yeah,
protect you.
It's to protect you so you don't have to worry about someone trying to come out and enforce against you or
Sure.
show up and mowing your
So you could rip
Your
out
property.
your
Those
turf,
darn 8
put in
inches.
a low grow.
Otherwise, you'd have to tell my neighbor to
Item.
completely change their grass because
Without
there's
that.
probably
100%.
like 60% clover at this
Interesting.
point. So
I don't know if that's very clear.
Well, I mean, yeah, I was just thinking, like,
Also example A, I would love to do that.
as someone who just purchased a property and started
City of Oshkosh.
mowing a lawn, I'm like, my lawn is largely creeping Charlie,
Yeah.
clover, and other things that are really not grass, which is perfectly fine by me. Some people intentionally plant and switch to creeping thyme or some other kind of low grow plant. So okay,
Or a slow grow grass.
yeah. Low grow, no mow.
There
or
still
low
is
mow.
something I guess I'm not understanding, and maybe you can help me with that. I'm hearing you say that if you have turf grass and then you have landscaping, that you would have a border here of some kind, like the little rubber things or the little bricks or the little something
people
or
do all
other,
sorts of stuff. And people do natural one now where they just have the
or you
call
have
it
something
dirt, it's
low, yeah.
dugout or
Why would it be important there, but not be important on the outside of the property where you're butting against your neighbor? If you're trying to protect your neighbor from all the bad things that could be happening with native planting, like maybe they might get a flower instead of grass or something.
So just to make sure I understand the question, you're asking why we allow those things, landscaping, along the property line, but not the native planting.
Yeah,
The native area.
why the 5-foot buffer in one case and not the other? I now understand. Okay.
Yep, and really at the end of the day, it gets back to adjoining property owners trying to mitigate concerns of neighbors and trying to head off potential issues between property owners. Landscaping, adjoining properties has become the norm, common practice in the world we live in, right? You think about it, it's all over the place. People have landscape beds and berms and fences and stuff. There's a perception out there when we start to get into more of these environmentally friendly natural areas of potential issues. As the ordinance was drafted and as we were researching it, a lot of the municipalities were trying to balance that perceived negative versus giving an opportunity to do something. And that's where the 5-foot idea came in. It's really no different than we deal with zoning and setbacks. Why is some districts 10, some 15, some 20, some 25? It's a perception that that thing that's going in, that industrial building should be 30 feet back, but that house should only be 25 feet back. A lot of it does come to perception and perceived negative impacts.
And we can propose removing it. I mean, that's a,
To remove the 5-foot buffer?
yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least to reduce it.
But yeah, I think
To your-
we should.
to your
I get its
point.
intent. It was like palatability at the time, right?
Exactly. I mean, you look at a lot of the times when new ordinances are drafted, they are typically done on a side of it that is being a little reserved.
Sure.
Because you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can always reduce it as you show that that perceived concern isn't there.
Sure.
But it's really hard to go the other way.
Anybody else have any questions? Confusion?
How do we propose the change to the 5-foot thing?
Well, Mark, how would we do
We just
that?
tell you here now, or would you like something official and fancy?
No, I mean, I think the discussion here is good. We can go back, we can work on drafting. We'll have to see what the appetite is, Joe and his colleagues. But we can start working up, I think first we want to start with the clarity. Let's get that
Agreed.
figured out. Once we're good on a clarity standpoint, then I think looking at the specifics of the ordinance, the 5-foot versus 3 feet or 2 feet or whatever that is. But first, I'd like to focus on the clarity. Because until we have that, what's in the ordinance is irrelevant if people don't understand why
Very
we're trying to do what we're trying to do.
I would like to echo the recommendation for the application that examples be provided, and perhaps even some, as I'm just mulling this all over in my head, like, what if your yard, part of your backyard or the vast majority of your backyard is surrounded by a fence? Like, does that
Negate.
Is there an exemption for
Yeah, does that
fencing?
change, like if your entire backyard is fenced in, and you want to take a large section of, kind of make a horseshoe shape of your backyard and turn that into what I'm going to call native landscaping, using native perennials in that landscaped intentional space, and a very small portion of the middle of your yard is grass. Does that require this? I mean, it sounds like currently it does.
Possibly, and I think
I
part of
think
the
you
question
guys
is
really have to look at it.
we'd have to
right?
look at it, and because when you say perennials, okay, is it flowers?
Perennials, yeah.
If it's perennial flowers, that's not the intention of that.
But it's a native.
But they're
But
native.
they're native flowers. If
More for like grass.
it's
Which
really
some
if it's,
people consider to be weeds.
yeah, if it's really and I think this is where clarity is important, and we have to figure this out. That was written in, I don't want grass, so I want something I don't have to mow. I mean, that's really that black and white is what the intent was. Now,
Yeah.
as we've evolved and things change, we need to start to tweak that and understand what is important. If you're planting a large area of flowers
Native
yearly,
flowers.
native flowers,
They're there all the time.
that shouldn't necessarily be what that was not what this was intended for.
Sure. Does the city offer guidance or education? So let's say someone does want to do, as I kind of suggested earlier, like replace their turf grass with creeping thyme or clover or something that is not going to meet the 8-inch rule. Like they're looking for the solution that this was meant to address, but like could we steer them in that direction from the start?
I don't know why we couldn't or shouldn't.
Yeah.
I think in those examples that were given to show what's good or needs a particular application or whatever, I think having those species examples would be super helpful. And then also showing not only what the current provision shows, but what any of our proposed changes would look like in those same examples, I think will be essential in communicating this and hopefully getting approval for it, right?
It's a little bit of best of both worlds too, right? I mean, it gets at the like perception of mice and whatnot, like in a large, I don't know, grassy area. But
Does having turf grass mean you don't have mice?
no.
It means
Oh,
you
but
have voles.
I just wanted
It means
to
you have a heck of a lot of
wanted to make
voles.
that.
Clarify.
No, but I mean like the stuff that's below 8 inches, I think. Steering people that way gets rid of perception issue and then also helps with
Yep, 100%.
with native plantings
And I think it's
sustainability.
something that we will want to lean on this group, the city forester, city staff in my division, aren't landscapers, aren't landscape architects. We're trying to fill a role and help with ordinances here, but we're gonna need help with understanding what are those species or alternatives. So research that this group can help provide on what are some alternatives that we should be encouraging.
We
It
do
can be
have the-
beneficial then for city staff because we deal with the guy pulling the permit. You know, so if we can from the start say, hey, just so you're aware, here are some options available to you beyond traditional turf grass. Just even if it's just an educational part that we can help get out there.
Yeah.
We just need help developing what that is.
Do we not have a landscape brochure that we've been making available to the public?
We do, but it is intended at landscaping, not necessarily
Turf replacement.
turf replacement.
The
It's
need-
at the use, the ones we have now are primarily targeted at encouraging the use of native landscaping in more, I'm gonna use air quotes here, traditional landscaping situations, not as turf grass replacements.
This is the one that we did 3 or 4 years ago.
So we maybe want to add a
That's gonna be-
section about turf
Yep.
replacement.
Right, because this
Yes.
is more like
It could maybe be.
flowers and things like that. Like we're talking about like a
And another thing that you mentioned a couple of times now, Mark, that's confusing me, we're making the assumption that people want to replace their turf grass so they don't have to mow. Couldn't we also make the assumption that they want to replace the flora in their area in order to encourage more diversity? Like bees and birds and butterflies and,
Yes, I'm using
and
mowing.
voles and rats. and-
Yeah, I'm only using mowing as an example as because that is what this situation is targeted to replace and make sure mowing is not enforced against you.
Okay.
There are much more additional reasons and benefits people choose to use these things
Right.
than just not mowing. It's not that simple, but what the native landscape ordinance was intended for was to give you an alternative to make sure streets isn't coming out and mowing your yard. Because
Right.
Yes.
under
You're
the-
protected because someone complained.
it's giving you
Yes.
protection from mowing.
right.
But you're right, 100% right. That is not the sole reason
Sure.
by any means that people choose this solution.
I also know that sometimes when people have been doing something for a long time and everything's been fine, and then they submit something like this to the city, then they're told they can no longer do what they've been doing, although there had been no complaints. How do we protect against that?
That one I don't have a great answer for. It's a little out of our wheelhouse in the planning side and helping with the ordinance.
Okay.
It's not, unfortunately, necessarily unique to this situation where people have done something maybe that is in conflict with various sections of municipal code, and then when it's brought to light, there's enforcement action taken afterwards.
Well, and that's where we got this to start with. Somebody came to us and asked, what can they do? And I know that finally, I think we resolved that this year. Emma, didn't you tell me that you and Brandon had been out and?
I don't think that individual we've heard from yet though, but I know it's on the up and up, so.
Okay. So in trying to do the right thing, and I know it's happened at least 3 times since that I can think of right off the top of my head, where somebody has come to us, either the sustainability board or the city, and said, this is what I want to do, what are the rules? And basically the city has said, oh, well, we never had any rules, so now we'll create some. And in doing that, they've excluded the person who was asking how they could do it right. Does that make sense? You know the cases I'm talking about, so.
I do.
Probably, yes.
Some of them. Unfortunately, and the best answer I have for you is that is unfortunately the role of local government and how it works. When things change and new opportunities and new things are out there, government can get involved. For better or worse, and it comes back to a little bit what we talked about before, where there's the perceived concerns with it. Look at metal roofs when we dealt with that issue.
Yeah.
We heard a lot of negative feedback on people not wanting them. We had a small segment that wanted the city to encourage the use of metal roofs. We had a larger segment who had concerns about reflectivity and light shining and bouncing off. And so someone
But they
may
were
bring-
uninformed decisions, they were, right?
Correct. But that is a situation where someone brought something in on a small spec that wanted to it, and then when it got attention, then there was conflict between the two sides. Not necessarily because of them wanting to do it, but now it was out in the public realm and opinions were formed with or without proper knowledge of what the situation was, but it became the topic. And then we had to step in and try to write an ordinance to handle it.
True, and I mean, how many times does that happen where a perceived thought isn't an accurate thought? Which is, why when, for example, if somebody goes to vote, it would be good if they knew who they were voting for beforehand. It's sort of the same thing here, that if somebody wants to complain about something they think might be not good for their neighborhood, maybe they should learn about where it's at in today's modern world and not where it was when Grandpa said, don't ever let anybody put a metal roof on next door. Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, you've been in enough public meetings with me. It's not always the case, right?
It's definitely not the case, so I'm just trying to get that out there, yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for all your help with us,
I do
helping
have a
with us
quick question
understand this, but Joe still has something.
Yeah, sorry. From like a process standpoint, are we okay as a board? Like we gave direction to kind of clean up some stuff. Is that okay for you guys, or do you have to bring it to council and then?
So actually, the way the city ordinance works
Okay.
is your direction is taken to the department head, who then evaluates capacity for the city staff to work on it.
Okay.
If it is determined city staff has capacity to work on it, we'll let you know and we'll start working on it. If the department head determines there is not capacity, then it goes up to the city manager for final determination.
Okay.
We'll bring it. I think this is something that makes sense for us to work on.
Sure.
There's nothing jumping out at me. I know both Brian and Emma have interest in this side of things, so as long as we can fit it into their workloads, I don't see it as an issue, but we'll do our normal analysis to make sure we have capacity to work on the changes that you're asking for.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't know what the process. I
Yep.
think every city does it a little different. I was a little hazy on how we did it. So.
There is always the other end of the spectrum where council gives direction that they want something work done, and then we work on it.
But it doesn't have to come from council every time, I guess.
It does
was my-
not.
Okay.
No, boards and
Doesn't have to
commissions
go. Okay.
frequently make requests of things they're interested in, like staff to work on.
Sure.
And as long as we have capacity to work on it, we will. If we don't, then it may go to a council level where
Sure.
they make that decision.
Is there anything we can do to help with any of that work? I guess just let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one I see is really looking, what are those alternatives? Like if you guys can help with some of that research,
Yeah.
what are some other alternatives that we can help promote? If we don't have to do the research and then creation of the documents, it can lessen the workload on Emma and Brandon a little bit. And more often than not, what it does is speeds up the process.
Love it.
Can we invite Wild Ones to the next meeting to speak on the topic of like turf replacement alternatives? Maybe somebody over there would want to, they have a lot of that information available. I'd go and extend that invitation if that's okay.
I think that's okay.
Don't know why it would hurt.
I think we should, and I have a couple of contacts there, so I'll see what I can do about getting somebody who's available on a Monday night. Not a Thursday night, but a Monday night. Okay, anything else on the landscaping? Let's move on then to the Energy Innovation Grant, the EIGP update. Emma?
Yeah, so the contract is still in the works. I guess they had it done, but then their attorneys found some issues with it. So they're working on that. So it's got pushed back 2 or 3 weeks or so. And this isn't just for the city of Oshkosh. This was all awardees. So we're still kind of waiting to hear back from them before we can move forward with, the implementation and the creation of the plan. So.
Okay. And this is the one that we don't have a deadline on? Is that correct?
So for spending the funding, is that what you're?
Right.
So I believe it's like June 2025. It's not quite a full calendar year, but sometime early next summer, I think we have to have it done and money spent.
They
So-
should give us an extra 3 weeks
On the-
every time something goes wrong.
And it's something typically when you deal with the state, if it
Yes.
does continue to get pushed back, they're usually willing to make sure you have sufficient time to complete them.
Okay. The next one is me, the Next Trucks Recycling. I put on here, and then I totally forgot to bring the article I had found on it. I'm sure many of you saw it. It was on the front page of the Herald a couple of weeks ago. And what it is where organizations or municipalities or whatever collect the soft plastic, like a bread bag or anything that you can make a thumbprint in, when it stretches, because we have no other way to recycle that. And then what they do is they take that and they turn it into benches. And it takes an awful lot of bags to make a bench, and there are several places in our community that do collect these plastic bags. But I guess what I wanted to raise was, first of all, just the knowledge to the public that this goes on and we shouldn't recycle those bags, but we should save them and make a commitment to get them to someplace where they will be reused. But would we want to consider having something like that at one of the municipal locations, like maybe the senior center or City Hall, or just wanted to kind of throw that out there and see if there was any appetite for that sort of thing. I know we're going to be told that there's no staff available to collect them, and, but I figure if we don't mention it, it can't happen. So, just wondering if anybody has any input on that, or...
We do the Next Trucks program at the university. We have for several years. There were a couple of years where we weren't participating, and I don't remember what the reasoning was. Our postal services staff used to take the bags to Festival Foods. That's kind of, I think, one of the main collection points in the community. We have since kind of stopped. We pulled all of our public-facing bins, so we had bins in a couple of the academic buildings and a couple of our, in Reunion and some of the other places. And we did that for really two reasons. One was a staffing chain, right? The university has reduced its staffing pretty significantly. And then we were also getting a lot of contamination. And so a lot of people were not following the rules, and they were putting regular garbage in there. And then once the plastic becomes so contaminated, it all
no
has
longer
to,
usable
yeah,
for this, and you have to toss it.
had to be landfilled. So, I think it's a great idea if we could get the collection bins in more places where people go and are going to take them. Always, I think, just being mindful of just making sure, there are lots of people who kind of mindlessly do things, and they, throw their Starbucks cup in there. Well, if it's got milk in it and then it sits for a couple of days, we've had to throw, entire bins of plastic out because it's just been so rotten.
One bad apple.
It's one bad apple. But yeah, I think the program is worthwhile.
Well, hopefully the Herald article also alerted the community to the fact that this does go on, and that we should be saving those bags, because of course when we have we had the at the farmers market, which is coming up next, so I'm going to segue gently into that if nobody minds. We had the recycling person from the county there this last time, right? You two were there with her. And how did that go?
I think it was great. It was really convenient to go, if you have any recycling questions, our expert is right
Talk to
here.
Kelly.
And then we were just hand off. It worked out really well.
Good. So there was a lot of engagement with that.
Lots of engagement, lots of additional questions. They're also doing a recycling class program. I'm actually doing it too. So I think she got some good interest in community members to sign up for that too.
Oh, excellent. And actually at the farmers market, we should also be, when we should take our own little recycling bin and have it there, but then we have to deal with it, of course.
We
Which
had
means
some
you
thoughts
take
on
it home
that.
with you, Brad.
We did.
We have thoughts.
We did have some
We're
thoughts.
pretty creative people.
Yeah.
And by
Yeah.
I mean Brad.
Yeah,
We
of
had some
course.
thoughts. Yeah.
Okay, and those thoughts you'll be sharing at some point,
Yes.
right? Okay, got it.
Just some thoughts on the last topic though about the retracts. I think it's worth noting that there's other steps before you could maybe bring your plastic bags that are waste to a recycling center. The number one thing is refusing them and finding alternatives. So you can bring a bag. I think the farmers market themselves even provides reusable bags. So if you're in need of that, that's the number one way to reduce plastic waste and to make sure that we're not being wasteful with plastic bags. You could also just reduce the amount you use, like carrying more things in say a crate or your arms is always an option. Rethinking like what you need in general. Also repurposing the bags like you talked about, Margie. There's other ways you can just bring back your plastic bags until they rip. Also, reusing them for that purpose. Repairing them is probably not in the scope of like a plastic bag, but I've actually seen like some people that will iron plastic bags together to create a durable.
sewing them together.
Yeah, and then you can sew them once you increase the thickness. So it's like you take an iron and you use wax paper to kind of laminate them together, and then recycling them is potentially an option as well. So that's really on the last kind of thing you should be considering when you're thinking about plastic bags is turning them into benches.
And absolutely, we would prefer they didn't even exist. But they're so practical, and everybody brings home their bread or something in them, so we all end up with something.
Right. I think they're. Yeah. I mean, I know. I definitely agree with a lot of Jake's points. I mean, this is something that I know some of the recycling coordinators and folks in the area have said is, we can definitely refuse or bring a cloth bag instead of picking up a yellow bag from Festival Foods or whatever. But oftentimes there are lots of other things in our world that we consume as people that are wrapped in plastic. I mean, and as much as we try to avoid some of that stuff, there are alternatives, right? There's certain plastics you can avoid. Some people out there probably can avoid all of them if you really, really try. But
Pretty
yeah,
tough.
Yeah, very tough.
but right, like bread or your toilet paper, paper toweling. I mean, right? You can not
The
use-
wrap on it.
Yeah.
You should just get a bidet and you won't even need the toilet paper. There you go.
All the alternatives.
Yeah, lots of alternatives to everything, right? Okay, is there anything else on farmers markets that you wanted to share? We do have another farmers market coming up,
We do.
and we have who volunteering for that?
Me again.
Okay, and we have with you Jake this time?
Yep,
Okay,
the
and you can
28th.
still make it?
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to be sure, is there, we have a new member that we haven't invited. We'll tell you all about it later, and you'll want to be there probably. It's a ton of fun, it really is.
Sounds splendid. I met up with these guys last time.
Yeah, they
Oh, well,
came and
perfect.
visited us last time.
Yeah.
Just think, you could be there the whole time with them. What fun. Okay, so we do have that coming up on the 28th. We'll be there. And did we get postings, did we get Facebook postings up in the sustainability thing for that? We're going to try harder this time, right? Maybe if we submitted that like right now, not
Well, if
this
we
very
had
second,
pictures
but-
to submit, that would be helpful.
Oh, did we not get any taken?
We did not. You can yell at me
Vic,
later.
you have to tell me that I have to come down and take them. We'll
Too
have
busy
some
talking to people.
fine pictures for next year.
Sure.
Okay. And under futures, okay, so summer's farmer's market, that's it, right? Because that's the last one then.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a winter's farmer market, but I don't know if that's something we want to, it's not, it doesn't bring in thousands of people, it only brings in hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
So, future speakers, someone from Wild Ones. Is there anything else, any other suggestions people would like to make for further out for speakers? Any subjects that we really want to pursue? Okay, when you think of them, you send them to Emma, and we'll see what we can do about getting them. again, we're doing that with I'm doing that with the Sustainable Communities Network. And so there are lots of opportunities there to pull them in for us too. So just wanted to make that aware. Okay, then, our next meeting will be on Monday, October 7th at 6 o'clock, right here in this very room. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn to workshop.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks.